frequency lounge, where your heartbeat goes to drown in a deeper, deeper sound. Rise up, then we melt back down. This is the frequency lounge. Let your body flow.
Welcome back to the Frequency Lounge. This is a space where we talk about the patterns people live in, the stories they inherit, and what it actually takes to become who you're meant to be. Today, I'm sitting down with Bryan Rasmussen. Bryan and I met through the acting world, but what I've always appreciated about him is that he's one of these people who refuses to fit into a single box. He's an artist, a community organizer, a music teacher, a chef, and a business owner who just founded These Guys Pies. But beyond all of that, he's someone who spent a lot of time questioning the systems, beliefs, and expectations that shape who we become. So today we're going to talk about emotionally unavailable parents, religion, control versus flourishing, ADHD, spectrum disorders, creativity, and what happens when you're trying to figure out who you are underneath all of the labels and expectations that have been placed on you. So Bryan, welcome to the Frequency Lounge.
Thank you so much.
Before we get into all this juiciness, who is Bryan today?
Bryan today is doing a bunch of stuff that he wanted to do for a long time, but sometimes we get these perceived barriers between us and what we want to be doing, and a lot of times I think we wait for permission to be ourselves or to say it's time to go after the thing, but I only have a few rules for life that I like keep it short and sweet. One of them is, if you think it's cool, you're supposed to be doing it. Simple as that. If you think something's cool, then go after it. Try it, A lot of people are afraid to fail, but I think that's a really important, another really important lesson in life is to learn, that failure is not, it doesn't make you a failure, it's learning. It's like Edison said, didn't fail 1,000 times, learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So, but yeah, there's fear and a lot of things wrapped up in that. We can get into that, so.
Yeah, well, I'm really curious to learn about this cult that you had to go through when you were in high school, is that right?
Yeah. It was a mild cult, but kids would make fun of it as being a cult then in school, and it's funny, we actually had a Bible study about why we were not a cult, and which if you have to have a Bible study about why you're not a cult, then maybe you're dancing up the line there. But I grew up in church. I grew up United Methodist, went through confirmation class and everything in middle school, about 6th grade, 7th grade when that happens. And those are the churches my parents chose to go to. They went to United Methodist churches. They church shopped for a while, so I didn't really feel like I had a grounded spiritual home as far as a church that was consistent in my life. Because ADHD parents, they're like, oh, let's go try this church this week. It's like, I just made friends over that one. So I grew up with a religious background. I would say we were particularly dogmatic as a family, pray before dinner and such. But, it's not like we wear it on our sleeve like, a lot of people do. Like their faith is their whole personality. And then when I got into high school, I've been, going through a divorce in the family, changing schools twice, and just general depression and anxiety from all that and just being a teenager, on top of it all. And I just didn't feel like my parents' spiritual choices were the same for me. I didn't feel like the churches they were choosing, the communities they were choosing spoke to me, had anything for me really. So I decided to branch out on my own, and I got invited to something called Club. Yeah, that's what they call the Unlife meeting. It's kind of like college students doing Saturday Night Live in a garage.
Okay.
Kind of there's songs and funny videos and skits, and then a message at the end about, now that they've entertained you, now you get to hear about Jesus for 5 minutes. So
what is this group called?
It's called Young Life.
Young Life?
And it's a national, non-denominational ministry, which, it's like any community. It can be really healthy or it can be really unhealthy, depending on who is, running it. Right. So my takeaway is that when you get a bunch of insecure teenagers together and they start spiritualizing their insecurities and playing police with each other and enforcing, their personal convictions on everyone, it's a little toxic. Get a little toxic there. So in hindsight, I actually kind of respect institutional religion more than kind of the freeform, evangelical, non-denominational stuff that's out there, because it's more easily to manipulate the group, I think.
How old were you when you?
I was 15 when I started going around, and they talked about God and stuff. So I was like, oh, I go to church. That's familiar. It seems safe. And then you realize that not everyone's on the same page as you. So
And what does that mean?
Well, I think that people that find their faith later in life, that didn't maybe grow up in the church like me, a lot of them have a story of like hitting rock bottom before they, finally
Find
like,
God.
find God, find Jesus, give their life to Christ, whatever you want to call it. I think people who grew up in church, we don't make sense to people that found their faith later, and so it's like they need you to have that same story of you hit rock bottom and then you gave your life to Christ, where it's like, I felt like I was going through it in life, but I didn't feel like I had hit rock bottom, but it's like there was extreme like pressure for you to have that kind of story, and so like, basically you kind of have to twist yourself into a tragedy, or more of a tragedy maybe than you already are, and like that's the core of your faith is I'm broken and I'm wounded and I need God, which is true at some level, but for that to be like so like the main emphasis is
For a 15-year-old?
Yeah, for a 15, 16-year-old, we're trying to figure ourselves out. We're trying to figure out who we are and like who we are in the world and who we are to each other. And I'm not against belief systems and structures, but anything can be weaponized. So
was this like a high school that you had to go to this like every day? Was it like or was it
no?
I don't know anything about this, so like you need to explain this.
Right. Okay. So how it works is basically the leaders are college student volunteers.
Okay.
Right. So they went through Young Life and everything too, and so you got these. My leaders were out of college, which is a little unusual, but not that unusual. And basically they would host trainings at their home. We had leadership training, so I got invited to be on the student leadership team after end of my junior year, which meant I helped run the club. I actually played guitar at the club for a bit and led the songs. And then also there was like the general Bible study. They call it campaigners, which is like the one you can invite anyone to just come, get involved and see what it's all about. And so like 5 days a week, like when club was in season, it would be on like Mondays, and then we'd have campaigners like on Tuesdays, and then have leadership on Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever. And one of those mornings there'd be a small group, like we'd meet at Panera before school and like have Bible study. So all seems like really good stuff. I guess for me personally, though, aside from just like the toxic social part, I was extremely depressed from the divorce at the time and just moving schools and getting bullied as a kid and everything you go through life as a young kid in this country. And I realized that I was using faith as like a reason to not commit suicide.
Wow. I mean that's a very bold statement, and like what I was hearing from you is like you were just trying to find somewhere that you belong.
Yeah, because I had a really hard time making friends at my first school. It was a small private school, and like two of the other boys decided that it was their mission to rally all the other kids against me. So I had like one or two friends at a time until they'd get to them and make it not cool to be my friend. So
and screw all these kids out here.
Oh yeah,
and they're hurting more than you are, and they have to make your life horrible. And then you had to go down this road of go into this cult, and then you're like, how does that actually shape like your mind?
Right. Well, it's funny because your experiences do shape you, of course, and I think one of the things that I had to like space myself from faith communities is just like the toxic positivity that can come with that. It's like God is good, so everything must be good, and if you're good with God, then everything's good with you. It's like you can still be going through crap, even when you're a person of faith. So I just eventually felt like church didn't have the answers to the things I was struggling with, like why have I had such a hard time making friends? Why is my family not, what I wished it was? Why all these things? And maybe it seemed like the answer was, well, you need Jesus for a while. But eventually I got to a point where I realized that I wasn't healing the way I knew I needed to heal. I still had these wounds that weren't healing. I still had people in these groups that were just absolute jerks to me, like assholes for Christ, I call them.
Yeah, all these people that are like the Bible thumpers, and then they're mean to others, or they're bullying you. And how do you navigate that? Like, do you talk to these people? Like, how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's like all the little microaggressions at church that people are all familiar with. Bless your heart and all those little things. But then there's just overt aggression that was just like, where did that come from, and what did I do to you to make you feel like you had to do that to me? And so I think something just come with age of just you learn that you're not going to get along with everyone. Not everyone's going to like you, and that's okay. I think that can be another part of church is like the obsession with like forgiveness. Like, oh, well, if someone wronged you, you have to forgive them. You have to. That's your spiritual obligation. It's like, why am I the one being held accountable for being wronged?
Right.
People love to victim, blame and shame, and it always just felt like accountability for me, but forgiveness for everyone else. So I don't know if anyone else had that experience in faith communities, but
I didn't really grow up in church. I mean, I think I started going to church at 9 years old, and we were like Lutheran, whatever that means. Okay. And I was the one questioning, like, how do you know God's real? To the pastor. I was that kid.
Right.
So I was like, I don't know, but I had to hit rock bottom to actually find God. So I'm one of those stories that would love me.
Right.
But it's a good thing that you didn't go to those substances and go down that road. And I'm glad that you're here. So just thank you for being here and being able to have this conversation and give people awareness, you know, because there's a lot of things that more things that you've struggled with. So let's get more into that.
Well, and maybe this is important to say too, that, you know, I said that I felt like church wasn't helping me heal from the things I needed to heal from because I could I didn't feel like I could say, I want to kill myself in church. No one knows how to deal with that. You know, it's like one of those things, like when you wrestle with suicidal thoughts, people, if you bring it up with people, they think you're doing it for attention. Or, you know, was the Robin Williams quote that people don't fake being depressed, they fake being okay.
Happy, yeah.
So people are like, well, you know, you seem happy and you're fine. It's like, I'm just trying to laugh my way through this crap, so it's the only choice sometimes.
It's like the survival, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you have to portray something, but inside you're like, it's chaos.
Yeah, and I am toxically positive. I don't get why. Like, I have this optimism that just things have got to get better, but maybe it's because I've already been through the crap, and so it's like, hey, it's got to get better from here. So, and as far as back to your first question, where I am in life, like, it's been amazing since I moved here to Vegas. That just like a bunch of things just fell into place for me. You know, all the accolades you listed there. Ever since I moved here, I've kind of done all the things I'm passionate about, from performing arts to, you know, to acting, you know, and getting signed with the agency with you, which was like so bizarre to get scouted on Instagram. It's like, I haven't acted in years. But
They just wanted our money.
yeah, I know.
We won't get into that.
No, live and learn. But, you know, I'm starting this pizza catering company, and that's, you know, been a lifelong passion of mine, cooking since I was 5. And I got to cater for a friend's production yesterday, which was great. Everyone loved it, and that just feels good, and people enjoy what you do.
Yeah, he got to cater my event too,
yes,
and
that too, last
pizza.
week.
I love pizza, and you know what? Las Vegas doesn't have really good pizza, but this guy, he knows what he's doing. He doesn't use Vegas water to make his pizza.
Right. I think you told me there's a guy in town who has Hudson River water shipped in from New York.
Yeah.
That's wild. So, yeah, there's a few good spots in town, but yeah, you gotta definitely hunt for them. So, but yeah, so with this company, I will get to, you know, serve the public, but also get to work in production, doing catering and whatnot, which is, you know, always adjacent to. I try to find the Venn diagram of all my interests, you know, and where can I do all these things together? Where can I be creative and cook and, you know, be around awesome weirdos?
Yeah, I love being weird, and I love being creative. And so when exactly did you start questioning the things that you were being taught?
It was after a lot of reflection, actually after I kind of got ejected from the Unlife group, because I was on the path to be a leader in college, went through leadership training, you know, shadowed a few of my friends that were leaders at other schools where they were placed, and thought that was, I mean, that was what I thought my path forward was going to be for life. You know, I at that point thought maybe I was going to go into ministry, and then unceremoniously I was asked to leave the group.
Wow. And how did that make you feel?
Totally burned and rejected, and like I had been showing up and like been faithful and contributed to the group really, you know, a ton. It was almost my whole world. But I just felt so broken and like abandoned all over again, like, you know, just. And
then all those feelings start coming back, like, do I belong here?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had those same feelings, you know. And anybody that is dealing with any suicidal thoughts, please dial 988. Reach out to the crisis lines. I volunteer with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. There's a lot of programs out here to help you and to just know that you do belong and that there are people who want you here. And just please, if you are struggling, reach out to somebody. Reach out to me. I don't even know who you are. You can reach out to me. I do this. This is what I do now because I have had those same kind of thoughts. I've attempted, and it's not a fun feeling. So how have you what kind of things have you done to overcome those feelings?
Yeah. So one of the things I learned and recognized about when your brain is in survival mode, which I was for a very long time. Wanting to kill yourself is your brain trying to tell you that the situation you're in is so unacceptable and not for you, and you don't feel like yourself, and it's not feeding you, it's not nourishing you, you're not flourishing here. It's basically your brain telling you, you have to get out of this situation. Like, this situation is so bad, it's not worth living through. And to just take that and kind of look at it as okay, I'm being told that I'm not okay. I need to recognize that. I need to do what I can myself to take care of myself while I'm, to get through that feeling of, okay, well, what needs to change? What do I need to fix? Do I need to cut people out of my life? Do I need to walk away from something that's not that's not moving me forward or not just not healthy for me. So just learning to recognize your emotions. Like we're really not taught like what our emotions mean very well. It's like I've had to talk with a few people recently just about what anger means, because especially for guys, we kind of get told to suppress our anger all the time because angry man's scary. Like, yeah, when men get angry, we can, hurt people and break things. So it's
So can
good.
women.
Well, yeah, they can too, but it's just a little more so. But so we get taught to really suppress that anger, and what anger is what you feel when you feel like injustice has been done to you, like you've been wronged or something bad has happened. And so so anger is supposed to come from like a moral place of like, no, I feel something is wrong and it's got me here. And basically when we tell men that they can't express their anger, we're telling them that they can't feel wronged. You're not supposed to feel wronged. You're not supposed to feel like just you're supposed to take it. Just shut up, don't be angry, we don't want to hear it. And so that is a really toxic cocktail for a lot of guys out there that wrestle with anger issues. It kind of feels like that's the only emotion we're allowed to express sometimes. So I think just doing some work of like learning what your emotions are trying to tell you and what to do with that. Not just reacting to your emotions, but like listening to them and and just thinking about your life and okay, what needs to change? What do I need to fix? What don't I have that I need?
And how do your parents like fit into all of this?
My dad is still the building manager of his church. That he's been that since I was a kid, and he kind of always he never went to church with my mom and my sister and I while they were married. He always went to his church because stuck in his ways. So that was always like an interesting dynamic. Oh, mom and dad don't go to the same church. So that was like a
Did you ever go with him?
Yeah. And it's mostly older people that it's just no, they were United Church of Christ, and I'd say they're a fairly healthy denomination compared to some others. So. Just kind of nice, just not super deep, not super, challenging as far as a spiritual place, but lovely people and just, And then my mom, like I said, she bounced around between churches, so it's like, it's funny, the one my dad's the building manager at has, that's been very consistent in my life as far as just a place to be that feels like, I've been there since I was a kid. There's a picture of me on the wall when I was like 4 or 5 or something, so I guess I could say that feels like a home, maybe not a spiritual home, but it's, that's a community that I grew up with, so. My mom knows that I've been burned by church. Actually, when I lived in Yuma, when I first moved out west 10 years ago, they were going to a church that said they were non-denominational, but they were affiliated with the Southern Baptist Conference. And got involved with the worship team there, doing sound and playing guitar like I usually do, and always end up getting roped into that. Honestly, I eventually left because just the energy I was getting from a lot of the other guys there. Like, there's some churches that don't like single men. Just like, no, you're not married. What's wrong with you? Like, you must be running around and, doing sinning and whatever. And so, or the vibe I got from some of the guys at that church was that they thought I was like trying to steal their wives or something. Yeah, it was just like, I'm just trying to be part of the community.
Can we just like praise Jesus?
Yeah.
Instead of like passing judgment?
Well, small town Arizona, there's not much else to do. So yeah, I walked away from that church, and I found a Unitarian congregation there in Yuma that I really enjoyed for a while. That's a very healthy community as far as I'm concerned. They're non-dogmatic is part of their creed, and their focus is on things that create human flourishing, right? So it's very, very human-centric and not, we have to think less of ourselves and, more of God. And that was a very validating group because, a lot of them also had rough experiences with traditional religion, so.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that, and I might need to poke around the Unitarian church here in Vegas.
Never even heard of this kind of church.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Unitarian.
Yes, Unitarian Universalist.
Okay. So many words. What's something that you've accepted about yourself now that you've spent years trying to change?
I'm not sure I would say change as much as like develop awareness of myself, like just trying to understand myself. I'm pretty good about knowing when something is or isn't for me in life, so I can't lie to myself. I know how I feel about something pretty immediately. So I'd say just trusting those instincts more. This might not sound totally positive, but I have less patience with people who are wasting my time and not for me and not, aligned with where I'm going in life. So
there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
at least
no.
you know that.
Right. Well, I think part of it was the people pleasing that I did when I was in faith communities, that I thought that was, a way to connect with people because I bought into you only are going to matter if you're in service to others. Right. The only way you're going to ever matter is if you're always in service to others, which I believe that service to others is a massive part of our purpose here in life, that we are intrinsically bound with each other as humanity, and you can't separate that. But yeah, I was just so totally committed to like, I have to be of service to others. I have to be of service to others, that I spent so many years neglecting myself because no one had ever really invested in me and, made me feel that valuable. You know, so I think maybe to get back to your question, it's been learning to value myself regardless of how other people feel about me.
Yeah, I mean, because that is so important. I know from my own experience, like I hated myself for so long. And it's like, how does somebody this small think that they need to die? You know, like you were young when you had those thoughts. I was like 9 years old when I first had those thoughts. And it's like, how are we able to go through these life and just think that we are so less than everybody else?
Right.
You know, it's like, it sucks.
It does. Because, you know, our brains are geared for survival, right? So whatever crappy situation you're living through and surviving through, your brain will build a, you know, belief system or a point of view that will not justify, but reconcile, attempt to reconcile your situation with, you know, this isn't right. And your own sense of justice and valuing yourself. So like learning to listen to that is also super important.
I think that's definitely, I have gone against myself so many times, right? And it's like, now I get to finally listen and understand, like, there's energy in everything. It's like, how do I read this energy, and how do I either say, no, that's not for me, and I'm not going to people please just to make everybody else happy, and I'm going to start making myself happy. There's no selfishness in that, because like at the end of the day, you are the most important, right? I'm the most important. And if anything, we are God. We don't need to be less than God, because we already have God inside of us. That's what some people think. That's my opinion on it, at least.
Respecting the divinity in others. Right?
Yes. So how has your view on like religion changed since this experience for you? Like, do you go to church still? Like, what is your role in the church now?
I'm not involved in any church at the moment. My parents found a very healthy community here that they are always telling me about all the wonderful things they do, between the food pantry that they feed, like I forget how many dozens of families a week out of it right now. Like they're a genuinely healthy group, and they're maybe a little, you know, more on the liberal side of things, but I'm still not ready to go to church yet, just because still healing from the people pleasing. I just feel like, to me right now, a church is a building full of strangers that, you know, don't really know me, aren't really, you know, invested in me, and there's just something about initiating that involvement in a community that I'm just still not ready for yet. On the other hand, though, I'm still a voracious reader, so I'm reading a book right now about kind of the modern evangelical movement and how it's kind of blended with politics in a lot of ways, and identities and national identities. So I'm maybe looking at religion from my sociology degree perspective now. Of I think I've just always been someone who's curious and like, why are we like this? I would say I'm still down with Jesus. You know, I would actually, the most spiritual thing I would describe myself as Jesus is my rabbi. You know, he's teacher. I don't necessarily need to believe that he was God in order to believe that he was right, because, you know, even Jesus taught through parables and stories that weren't true, but demonstrated, you know, things we know to be true. So, you know, love God and love yourself and love your neighbor, you know?
Yeah. A lot of these people that go to these churches, they're not loving their neighbors. They weren't investing in you. Like, they were telling you that you need to put everybody else above you, and nobody was putting that back into you. Did you see that with anybody else, or do you think that you were just being like picked on, or like, was it just you that it was happening to, or was there other people? I
mean, I can think of friends who, you know, I don't want to say ran out of communities, or just, you know, maybe they moved on because they realized it wasn't what they thought it was also. You know, faith communities are social first, you know, in nature. You know, it's a social group, really. And so, you know, if someone doesn't fit in the group and is causing, you know, problems, then it's, you know, humans do what humans do, and like, okay, you have to go.
What was their reasoning to X you out of the group?
You know, I still don't know exactly. I have an idea of maybe something I said one time that I won't say it was revenge. I'm gonna call it justice. That I just informed someone who was being spoken poorly of what the person was saying, and they got very upset at me for, you know, you don't say things like that. You know, you don't repeat them, and it's like, well, then you shouldn't say it. You know, so it's like, how are you more pious than me for that? Like, you know, people hate accountability.
I think it was a blessing, though. You're right, a blessing in disguise, even though it like hurt so much. Like, at least you got away from that, and you didn't have to be treated like that anymore. So what do you do now for your spiritual self?
There's a few people I follow online. I listen to their podcasts. There's actually a Rabbi Simon Jacobs who has a YouTube channel and a podcast that I've been really enjoying him. I think he's based in New York. Still a fan of Tim Keller. His book, The Reason for God, I found is a very, very intellectual approach to things. He's a Presbyterian minister in New York, and he's written a bunch of books that I would recommend to anyone curious about faith, Christianity, and just who we are in relation to God, whatever that concept is for you. I'd say like my prayer now is action. I kind of see prayer now as don't want to diminish anyone's prayer life, but sometimes prayer is a half-assed attempt to help. When it's like, someone comes to you with a problem and they need help and all you have to offer them is prayer, sometimes they need actual help. You need you to get off your butt and do something instead of just words. So I'd say my version of prayer now is as action in my life, both like taking steps to move me forward in life. And, I really believe you're not good unless you do good. And there's a lot of people that think, well, I don't do bad, therefore I'm good. No, you're kind of neutral. Like, yeah, that's good to not do bad, but that's also not the same as doing good. So there's a lot of that. I thought this thought earlier and I wanted to mention it to you. Do you feel like there's a type of person that thinks that in order to be good, you have to deny yourself what you want?
I'm sure there are people out there that do that, but
Like
I don't think you should have to deny anything to yourself that you feel is aligned with you.
Mm-hmm. I feel like it might be tied up in like self-sabotage. Like, you want something, but you never let yourself have it because,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think people get taught, like, you shouldn't act like you want what you want, right? You should kind of just, like, sit around and hope it comes to you. Like, prayer is like, no, that's a guaranteed way to be miserable, because sitting around waiting for things to happen to you is no way to actually achieve what you want in life. So I'd say, like, intentionality is, part of a spiritual practice for me now.
Yeah.
Well, I think it always has been, but I'd say that's, like, my spiritual discipline now is just intentionality of my life and relationships and where I'm spending my energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know as I'm getting older, it's like I can't be around certain people anymore. I have to remove myself. If conversations start going weird, I will leave the room. Like it's very humbling to start listening to how you feel and actually doing right by you, because at the end of the day, you are with yourself 24 hours a day. Nobody else is with you that amount of time unless you're like tied to the hip of your spouse or whatever. But even then, like, you guys aren't with each other 24 hours. You are with yourself 24 hours. You are in your mind 24 hours.
So I guess as far as part of my self-actualization and my sense of what's wrong with me that I had when I was, in high school and I was using religion to, as the explanation for that, I was undiagnosed ADHD. So I struggled with school. It didn't look like I was struggling in school because I would always know the answers in class and because I would actually read the material instead of use SparkNotes. But yeah, no, I was a C student. Now I was on a 7-point scale, so I was really like a B student.
C's get degrees.
Right. But yeah, no, I had serious social anxiety in school, like just from being, bullied when I was younger and just having this internal chaos of ADHD and not knowing that was it. I just thought, why am I so messed up and I can't function like normal people? And so that was a big part of my guilt and shame myself. Just I didn't feel like I could just function like a normal person. And once I got diagnosed, it was incredibly validating just to say, no, there's a legitimate reason you've been having these struggles your whole life and why you feel the way you do and think the way you do. So I'd say, seek help and get evaluated if you feel like you've got something going on with you. If you feel like there's something wrong, open up and talk about it to someone you trust or seek professional help, whatever. But I was in counseling after I got diagnosed with ADHD for a while. This place I went to was great, the Affinity Center in Cincinnati, and they really combined a whole holistic approach to, treatment of, talk therapy as well as medication. So I tried them all, 5-Ants, Ritalin, Adderall, all of them. I still have some Adderall. I take it just when I need it now. Because being on something like that repeatedly for days in a row will fry your brain, at least mine. But yeah, don't just tell yourself you're messed up and you're broken and you're wrong. If you feel like you've got some, a genuine block or, talk to someone, seek professional help. It makes a world of difference.
I think that's the hardest part for a lot of people is just talking to somebody, reaching out. Because I know when I was having problems, I was reaching out to people and they weren't responding. Right? So then you get into this hole of maybe I don't belong here, maybe I should just go ahead and do these crazy thoughts that I'm thinking about because nobody really cares. So I think you have to surround yourself with people who can hold you and that can also, you can hold them. Because it's very, people don't want to talk about suicide. Okay, that's why I joined the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, because I will be a voice. I will help you. I will talk you out of whatever you're trying to do, because nothing is worth that at the end of the day. Your life is worth more than you think and that you're being told. The stories that we tell ourselves, right? It's a lot of the things that are going on in our mind and the stories that we repeat every day. You were telling yourself that you didn't belong. I was telling myself I didn't belong. I did that for so many years, and then you start believing it, right? So I like to use my favorite quote from Marissa Peer: tell yourself, a better lie. Tell yourself a better lie. You're already lying to yourself, so you might as well tell yourself a better one that you can start believing.
And one of the things I'm grateful I learned from being a musician is you get good at whatever you practice, which includes your thinking. So the more you tell yourself certain stories, the more you tell yourself certain narratives or lies, or the way you interpreted something that happened to you, remember, that's still just your interpretation. You know, like, we do have a filter of how we take information in, and we practice that filter with how we think. And so, yeah, literally changing how you think can physically change your brain. So just be aware of that. You know, I would teach my students that, especially violin students, because just the anxiety and the pressure, because it's a difficult instrument, and, you know, can and when practice is difficult, it can really, you know, get people down. But I would remind them that, hey, you have a relationship with yourself. You know, I would ask them if they even knew that, if they understood they had a relationship with themselves, how they talk to themselves, how they think about themselves. And this one student, she was a perfectly good player, but whenever she found something to be just a little more difficult than she thought it was going to be, she'd, you know, have a meltdown and cry. And it's just like, honey, this is the first time you're trying this. You're new, you're learning, you're 9, you know? You're not allowed to be mad at yourself yet for not getting it on the first try. Now, if you practice for 10 years, you know, really hard every day for 10 years, and then you still couldn't get it, then you can be mad at yourself. But no, just having patience with yourself, I think, is also really hard for a lot of people, because I just heard this, you know, on the radio on NPR yesterday, you know, that talking about the anxiety that kids have these days, or, you know, not kids, young adults, that there's this pressure in our culture to have everything figured out by the time you're 18 to 21. No, especially with everything in the world changing as fast as it does today. Like, I think I wanted to be a mounted policeman at one point when I was a kid, like, because I rode horses for a while growing up. So I was like, okay, well, what can I do as a job with this skill? Anyway, but yeah, like, don't put that pressure on yourself to perform or to have everything figured out. It actually gets easier once you take that pressure off yourself to figure yourself out. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people's parents need to stop pressuring their kids to do what they want their kids to do instead of having their kids do what they want to do. So I know I had to deal with that when I was growing up. My dad wanted me to play the violin. I did for a year, and then I switched to the trumpet, and then he never came to our practice or our shows because I wasn't playing the violin, you know? So, but now I regret not playing that violin.
Just because you wanted to now, or
no, because I want to now. Like,
right,
I wish I still had the
right.
skill, because I love the violin. Listening to like classical music now, I'm like, I did not appreciate that, and I kind of wish I would have listened to my dad now that I'm a little older.
You know what? You were into what you were into,
but it's okay.
You know, so there are some things that our parents try and push on us that later we come to find out, okay, that's not that bad. It's just, I think sometimes there's just, like, when it's being pushed on you, there's just that natural resistance, like, no, don't make me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, now you got a friend who teaches. So.
Yeah, I'm going to get some lessons when I get my violin fixed.
I think that's one of the other great things about learning an instrument, is that you learn that self-awareness, because you actually have to listen to what you're doing and make sure that that's what you're doing, what you think you're doing in your head. Because I will have students that, you know, they weren't good at listening to themselves, and then I have them record themselves and listen to it. And they're like, I don't want to listen to it, it's going to be bad. I was like, well, you need to learn to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and be okay with that. Like, I'm struggling with this right now, but I will keep working at it and it will get better. So determination and persistence and practice.
Practice makes permanent. Remember that. Not perfect. So what is let's see, because we were talking about ADHD and like the spectrum disorder. Is that part of being on the spectrum, is ADHD?
So there's a new classification of, there's a lot of self-diagnosing happening on the internet, which is actually great because the DSM-5 is very slow to get upgraded. So there's a great community of people online that are having discussions about, you know, how ADHD can present, how autism can present. If you're lucky enough to have both, like me, there's now a label for AU-ADHD. So it's like you have 2 parts of your brain, one part craves structure, the other side can't stand it. And, you know, being on the spectrum is just that, it's a spectrum. It doesn't mean you have everything that other people have. You know, you kind of have your own personal flavor of things. I do now see it as a superpower, just as I do see the world differently from other people. And, you know, again, sociology degree, why are we like this?
I just love when people's brains work differently, because like high functioning spectrum, ADHD, like a lot of people don't have a voice in their head, okay?
Right.
Like the people that
Just
don't have a
quiet.
voice in their head, like there's something wrong with you. Not really.
Right.
But like, I couldn't even imagine like going through life without hearing like my voice in my head. Like that would probably drive me crazy. But if you never had a
Right.
voice in your head and I tell you that I have one in my head, now you probably think I'm crazy.
Right. I think that's another thing that musicians get good at with, like, you know, connecting with other people and maybe being aware of yourself in the group too. And I think that just teaches you to read people differently. You know, just once you're aware of yourself, you can see those things in other people too. So yeah, I'm convinced that's part of what makes musicians weird and awesome.
Hey, I mean, I love being weird and I love being awesome. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Actually, well, no, the other thought I had, one of my theories is about music is that we love music, or we find music interesting and amazing when someone else does something we wouldn't have thought of. And you're like, that's amazing, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's part of the beauty of creativity, is that we all make choices that other people wouldn't make. Like, as a guitar player, sometimes like you're playing a C chord and you're just like, it's just a C chord. Everyone plays a C chord, that's not original. Yeah, but you still play it the way you play it, not the way someone else does. So, you know, I remember wrestling with that as a guitar player and like writing songs and like, are people just gonna be able to tell that I listen to who I listen to? Are people gonna tell that I listen to U2 and Van Halen? Which, first off, it's a little arrogant to think that you would sound like Eddie Van Halen, like, ever. Like, no, you don't. You sound like you. But yeah, I think that's another thing to get comfortable with yourself about, is like, you know, learning that you know, you have a different relationship with the music you write, you know, compared to your audience. You know, there's plenty of people that have songs that they hate, but that the audience loves. Like, you know, actually, Duran Duran does not perform Hungry Like the Wolf anymore. They're done with it. They're just... That
means nothing to me. I'm sorry.
Oh, Hungry Like the Wolf. It was like their biggest song ever, and, you know, like they just are done with it. You know, 40 years of that song. You know, which is like maybe why I didn't go into recording as a career, because it's like, what if you write a song that you can't stand, but it's like your biggest hit, and you got to go out there and play that. What was it? I think John Mayer said Nickelback has got to have like that one song on the set list, you know, like there's like, I just gotta get to that one song, and then yes, like that's the one they love, and versus what everyone else wants. But anyway, I think there's a lot of spiritual discipline in learning to play music. So
yeah,
which I always forget that about you as a trumpeter. So I don't think I told you, I tried trumpet for like 3 months. I had horrible chapped lips the whole time and went back to violin.
Well, I did have eczema growing up as a kid, so
okay.
like my mouth was crazy. I had it on my arms, and the trumpet did not help me at all, but I still played it for 3 years.
Right, just suffer through it.
So, what kind of advice can you give somebody that's kind of in your shoes, like if they're a little younger or whatever, if you're growing up in these kind of environments where you're a split home and like you're trying to figure out who you are, and like what kind of advice can you give somebody today?
I'd say that you should trust your instincts, that, you know, if something feels wrong, then it probably is. One of my favorite books is by C.S. Lewis called The Weight of Glory. It's a kind of collection of essays and sermons that he had done over the years, and I think his son put them into a collection as a book. And one of the chapters is called The Problem of Pain. That, you know, pain is a big thing we think about in our lives as we experience it on a daily basis in one way, shape, or form. And a lot of times we feel like, I shouldn't be feeling pain. You know, this is unpleasant. I don't like this. Like, I shouldn't feel pain. Problem is, if you didn't feel pain, you wouldn't know if you broke your foot. You wouldn't feel hungry and feed yourself so you don't starve to death. If you didn't feel pain, you know, that would be way worse than you know, feeling it, because, you know. So I think learning to have a healthy relationship with pain, like I said about your emotions, like anger is trying to tell you something, pain is trying to tell you something. So learn to listen to it, not just resent it and push it down. Because it's trying to tell you the most important thing. You know, you're feeling pain, that needs to change. Something needs to change. And it could be that your family or whoever it is you're with all the time doesn't have the emotional tools or vocabulary to, you know,
guide you.
To guide you or work through it with you. Or sometimes your family's just too close to you. And, you know, like I know I have family members that are very good at making things about them. It's like, and even, you know, when you come to them for help, it's like, this isn't about you. I need you to stay focused on me. So yeah, like trust yourself. If the people immediately around you aren't safe, you know, like Rachel said about, you know, the hotlines and the communities out there, there are communities and resources for people that, you know, that are wrestling with something. When I was in Arizona, I was very involved with the LGBTQ community. I was actually on the board of the All Yuma Center, Token Ally, and yeah, there was a really strong PFLAG group of you know, parents of, you know, LGBTQ, you know, young people who, if your family wasn't safe, then that was a safe group to go to, you know, get help about being, you know, about being confused about your gender and identity and sexuality. And in Yuma, there's a lot of kids that commit suicide because they get thrown out of the house. for being gay because it's, fairly conservative community. And the terrible thing is the local paper is not allowed to report on suicides.
Interesting.
So it's this invisible problem in this small town that, they obviously don't want to talk about. And that's a horrible tragedy that happens to people that just deserve to be loved for who they are. So, the world's a hard place, and you got to find the people that, support you and recognize you and have been on their own healing journey and can help you on yours as well. So never tell yourself there's no one.
Yes, you are not alone. We are not alone in this world. Can you tell everybody where to find you?
Oh, let's see. I'm on Instagram as D's Guys Pies, as well as Bryan Music Man. And that's really my only public social media right now, so updates to come.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here and having this conversation and being so open. But what I love about this conversation is that it reminds us that growth isn't always about becoming someone new. Sometimes it's about peeling back those layers of expectations, conditionings, labels, beliefs, until you finally meet the person who was there all along, And for a lot of people listening, especially those who have felt misunderstood, different, or like they never quite fit the mold, I hope this conversation reminds you that different doesn't mean broken. Sometimes the very thing you've spent years trying to hide becomes the thing that makes you who you are. So thank you for sharing your story, Bryan, your perspective, your experience. And for everyone listening, it's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you are. This is the Frequency Lounge. We'll see you in the next episode. I always give high fives.
Yes.
Yes. Yay!